So it's been about 3 or 4 weeks since I got back from leaving my plants for 3 weeks, and I made a video about that right when I got home. It was like the first thing that I did. And a lot of them were in a bit of a state, and I wasn't certain that I'd be able to save them, even though they didn't necessarily look like they were completely dead or anything like that, just because I've never left them that long. So I left them, if you haven't seen the video, which you should go watch that before this one, but I left them for 3 weeks. Nobody was watching them, nobody watered them. Or just, nobody was even coming by to check on them, and I didn't see how they were until I got home. So yeah, we're gonna go through the ones that were probably hit the hardest, and I'm gonna show you how they are now, whether they survived, if they bounced back, and all that sort of stuff. Probably one of the most dramatic ones that I had was my Pepperoni Obstafolia, and here's a picture of it before when I had first gotten home. It was completely flopped over, which I've never had it do that before. Usually I water it when the leaves at the bottom, like the most mature leaves, aren't hard anymore. I just give them like a little tiny taco test, not too much because it's gonna break the leaf. But I usually squeeze it a little bit, and if it like doesn't give, then I just leave it alone. I don't water it. But if it gives more than I know it to give usually, then I water it. So if it's feeling like a new leaf that has just like popped out, then that's usually a good sign to water it. But if it feels like quite stiff and thick still, leave it alone. So that one, a lot of people have seen my update on it already, but in case you haven't, it completely stood up after I watered it. And some people were saying in the comments of my previous video to completely like put a stake up and then just see if it would over time stand back up, or with water it would. But honestly, I literally just watered it and let it soak in water for quite a long time because I bottom watered all my plants because they just needed it. And it ended up perking up right on its own. It took about 6 hours or so, so it did take quite a long time of it soaking in the water for it to completely stand back up. But since then, it's been doing completely fine. There's no new growth on it quite yet. I see some little like shoots coming out at some of these little junction, whatever you want to call those. But other than that, there's not been a ton of new growth at all, but I'm honestly just surprised that it didn't lose any leaves and that it's completely fine other than, not actively growing. But I thought that'd be nice for you guys to know. I think it does actually need to be watered right now again, but it did completely stand up on its own without me having to stake it up or prop it up or do anything like that. And then one of the ones that I was probably most worried about, although nobody in the comments of that video seemed to be very worried about this one, so maybe I was just overreacting, was my strawberry begonia, because that's one that likes to stay in wetter soil and just needs more water more often. So when I had gotten back, it looked like someone had like sat on it and it just did not look good. So I ended up having to chop quite a few leaves just because they were past the point of no return where they wouldn't like perk back up because they were just yellowing, and it just, yeah, it wasn't looking great. And I knew it would survive, but it was kind of just a matter of like, will it be a good looking plant still, and will it actually thrive again? And that was like the most prevalent issue in my mind. So I chopped back a ton of leaves and then propagated what I could. And then I just waited. I watered it and waited to see what it would do. And then let me show you all the new growth that it's actually popped out since then. So I think I've watered it like once or twice since then. So it just, yeah, it's doing great. All these leaves in the center right here are all new growth. And like, you can't even tell that it had to get a ton of leaves chopped, which is so nice. It hasn't started throwing out any like new offshoots or like anything like that. Cause the strawberry begonia, like it hangs over kind of like a spider plant. Like if it's doing well, it will throw out some shoots and then you can propagate those and all that. And it hasn't started doing that yet, but I think it's just been focusing on growing new leaves and stuff. And maybe the roots are in a state too, and they're like trying to rebuild as well. I'm just happy that it's putting out more new growth because I love to see new growth in my plants. And then the propagations that I had for it actually did quite well considering they didn't get watered for 3 weeks, and it's in a terracotta pot, so it like dries out really quickly. But those are doing really well. I added a couple more propagations to it as well. I'm not gonna show just because it's not right next to me at the moment, but it's doing super well too. So my strawberry begonias are thriving right now. And then another plant that actually is thriving right now when it was really dramatic when I got here is my neon pothos. And it lost a couple of leaves, and can you tell that it lost a couple of leaves? I mean, it looks perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, I don't know. It bounced back really, really well, which I'm not super shocked because pothos are just known to be really hardy and everything. But I mean, this literally has probably grown like a whole nother foot since I've been gone and like back again. there's just so much new growth down here, and I do need to water it quite often, and there's roots coming out of the bottom of the pot. So I do think that this is gonna be one that I need to repot in the next like week or so, and I might actually make a video of me repotting it just to see how bad the roots are. So keep your eyes out for that. But honestly, it's growing just fine and it's doing fantastic. It's just less about it being left for 3 weeks and more about needing to repot it, because you can tell when you start watering plants really, really often when you know it shouldn't have dried out yet, that is a good indication that there's not much soil left in there and it's really just a lot of roots. So I'm curious to see how they look, because I haven't checked the roots out on this since I got it. And then another one I know people were concerned about was my Mikens right here. And I mean, it's doing great. I did take, if you remember from that video, there was a bottle of cuttings that I had, and I did pot those back up into this pot, so that's why it might look a bit fuller. But the Mikens lost a couple leaves, of course, as it is going to if it's not getting watered. But I mean, there's new growth on every single stem. It's doing fantastic. It's putting out like healthy looking leaves. So yeah, it bounced back as well really, really well, and I am really pleased with it actually. And with the cuttings inside there now, it should be a much fuller pot, and I'm hoping to move it to a spot where it's going to get more light, because right now it's not getting a ton of light on one side, so I need to move it to where it's getting more light on this side, and then it can hopefully even out on the front and back, you know, so it's not just like all lopsided, everything full on the front. So a plant that I didn't mention in the first video very much was my Brazil philodendron, just because it kind of just did what it usually does, which is drooping down because it needs water. And as you can see, it looks a bit droopy right now because it needs water again. And this is actually similarly to the neon pothos situation. This dries out so incredibly fast, and I have a feeling, I mean, because this is a really long pot of philodendron. And it's in just a 4-inch pot, so I think that the roots might be overtaking everything in there. So that's another one that I probably need to go check out the situation of, just because it doesn't seem like it's thriving, because it is every other day needing to be watered, and it just is quite uncommon for my plants to be like that. So that's just something that we need to check out and be mindful of with your plants, is if you need to be watering all the time and it's like not consistently watering all your plants, so it's not dependent on like the temperature or the, you know, sun that it's getting or anything like that, then there's a good chance that the pot might be a bit crowded with roots and that it needs to be looked at, because there might not be enough soil in there for all the roots. And quickly, if we're going to talk about root bound pots and what to look for, and I'm sorry this video is completely taking a turn for what it's supposed to be, but we have to talk about this big philodendron up here. If you can see on the bottom right here, let me focus on it real quick. You can see there's some roots coming out down here actually, and there's quite a few, which means that they're probably not having enough space inside the pot to actually like wrap around the pot anymore. And this is just another one that needs to be watered constantly. It looks like some of the leaves might be yellowing as well. So that's just something to also keep an eye out for. And he's also gonna get repotted soon, just because your plants aren't gonna be happy if their roots are all squished together constantly. It's just, there's no nutrients for it to get if there's no soil for it to pick up the nutrients from. So it seems like all in all, my plants did pretty well. There is, however, one, it's not a casualty because it's not dead yet, but it's just, my most hated thing about plants is pests. And this is the only plant that actually got pests while I was away. Let me grab it real quick. It's been in quarantine, which is, as you know, if you see my last plant tour, the kitchen is my quarantine place for my plants. If they get pests or just are misbehaving, they go to the kitchen. So let me go grab him. So this philodendron Birkin is one of two. So I have another Birkin, but this is the one that got spider mites, and it's actually covered in webs. You can't see them on the camera because they're quite like fine and everything. I don't see many like of the actual mites. So I don't know if it was like a super bad case, but there's just a lot of webs on it, and it could be partially cobwebs and everything, just from not dusting them at all. But I have to admit, I haven't been taking care of it like I should have. I haven't even started treating him yet in like the 4 weeks that I've been back, just because it's been a bit overwhelming. So I'm gonna get into that hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. And if you're interested in seeing just what I do to tackle spider mites, and if it's a bad case of spider mites, what I do for that, just comment down below if you'd be interested in that, because depending on whether or not there's enough interest, I'll film it and then post that as well if that's helpful to you. But yeah, he is the only one that has gotten bugs, and he just needs a good wipe down, shower, insecticide, all that sort of stuff. Just because spider mites are, they just always keep coming back. And I think he was the only one that got them, and he was in a completely different area than the rest of my plants, which is quite lucky actually. It's nice that like one that wasn't right in the thick of all my plants got them, because then it would have spread a lot more. But I wonder if it was just because his area might have been a bit drier, because spider mites love just being in dry areas. So that might have been the reason why he got them, but I mean, who knows really, it could have just been chance. And then there's one more plant that I didn't mention in the first video just because I wasn't positive if he'd even survive, and he was roughing it a bit while I was gone anyways. Like it was well before I left on my trip that he was like not doing too hot. It is my Begonia Machulata, and this one was also in the kitchen, kind of on quarantine, because he just wasn't growing and he was crisping everywhere. And like I repotted him a while ago, and I filmed that actually, so there's a video for that. But I repotted him and he had those like seed starter mesh things around his roots, so the roots were quite rotted away because it just couldn't make it out of there. So I took cuttings from him and cut him all completely back to like bare sticks. There was no leaves left basically. And that was as like a sort of little test type thing, just to see what would happen, just as an experiment. And then I just propagated all those cuttings that I took, and I repotted those into the pot like last week or so. And I mean, you can see all the new little leaves that are here. So it's doing really, really well actually, now that I've propagated him and kind of started fresh. So I think he is on the mend now, and he should do really well from here on out. So I'm super excited about him because I do love the plant. It was just, I couldn't figure it out for a while. So now it seems like I actually did. And I mean, who knows if that will keep up. I mean, I say these things one week and then the next week it's like, okay, so I chopped them all back and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, he's probably one that I wasn't expecting to make a comeback, but he's doing great, and I'm super excited to see if he continues to do well and continues to grow super well for me. But yeah, all my plants are doing pretty well aside from that Birkin. So thank you so much for watching, and I guess here's the follow-up if you wanted it from that last video. But I'll see you guys in the next one, and take care.